The chalk dust danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the classroom windows of Westlake Elementary. Most students watched with rapt attention as Miss S. Bellamy demonstrated long division on the whiteboard, but 11-year-old Zara Jackson's gaze was fixed on the clock above the door. 23 minutes until the bell. 23 minutes until she could escape. Zara! Miss S. Bellamy's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Perhaps you'd like to show the class how to solve this problem since you clearly don't need to pay attention. Zara's stomach clenched as 30 pairs of eyes swiveled toward her. She knew the answer math had always been easy for her, but experience had taught her that showing too much intelligence in Miss S. Bellamy's class only made things worse. I don't know, she said quietly, shrinking into her seat. Miss S. Bellamy's thin lips curled into a familiar smile of satisfaction. That's what happens when we daydream instead of paying attention. Jessica, would you like to try? Jessica Peterson, whose blonde ponytail bounced as she eagerly raised her hand, walked to the board with confidence. It's easy, Miss S. Bellamy. You just. As Jessica worked through the problem, making the exact same calculation Zara could have done, in half the time Zara felt a small ball of paper hit the back of her neck. She didn't need to turn around to know it came from Tyler Wilson's desk. The snickering confirmed it. When she unfolded the paper later, she wasn't surprised by the crude drawing of a monkey with her name underneath. It was the third one this week. Don't pick that up, Miss S. Bellamy snapped as the crumpled paper fell to the floor when Zara was packing her backpack after the bell finally rang. This classroom isn't your personal trash can, Zara. Detention. Tomorrow lunch period. But I didn't. Zara began. Are you arguing with me? Mrs. Bellamy's voice dropped dangerously low. Would you like to make it the rest of the week? Zara shook her head, blinking back tears. No, ma'am. That's what I thought. As she walked out, Zara heard Miss S. Bellamy's voice soften considerably as she addressed another student. Beautiful work today, Jessica. Your parents should be very proud. The hallway was a gauntlet that Zara had learned to navigate with her head down, moving quickly, but not running, attracted attention from teachers who assumed she was causing trouble. Walking too slowly gave Tyler and his friends time to accidentally bump into her, knocking her books to the floor, or whispering things that the hallway monitors somehow never heard. Today, she almost made it to the main entrance before she heard the familiar voices behind her. Hey, Jungle Girl, where are you running to? Zara walked faster, clutching her backpack straps. I'm talking to you, monkey. A hard shove from behind sent her sprawling onto the polished linoleum floor, her knees burning from the impact. Her books scattered across the hallway as laughter erupted around her. Oops! Guess she slipped, Tyler announced loudly. To more laughter. Mr. Daniels, the vice principal on hallway duty, finally looked up from his phone. What's going on here? Zara fell, sir, Jessica said innocently. Tyler was just going to help her up. Mr. Daniels sighed with exasperation. Zara, how many times have I told you not to run in the hallways? Pick up your things quickly, you're blocking traffic. As Zara gathered her belongings, fighting back tears, she heard Mr. Daniels continue. Tyler, Jessica, good job in the district math competition yesterday. Westlake is proud of you both. By the time she'd collected her scattered papers and books, most students had already left the building. Zara hurried out to the pickup area where her father would be waiting. Marcus Jackson sat in his sleek black SUV, sunglasses hiding his eyes, posture military straight even in the driver's seat. The sight of him solid, dependable, unshakable, almost broke the emotional dam Zara had built throughout the day. But she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where anyone could see. Hey, sunshine, her father said as she climbed into the passenger seat. His deep voice always had a calming effect on her, a reminder of bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes and feeling safe. Hi, Dad, she managed, buckling her seatbelt and staring straight ahead. Marcus Jackson had been an FBI special agent for 15 years before retiring 2 years ago to take a private security consulting job that allowed him more time with Zara after her mother died. Those years of training had made him exceptionally observant, particularly when it came to his daughter. Rough day? He asked, pulling away from the curb. It was fine, Zara replied automatically, the same answer she'd given for months. Marcus glanced at her skinned knees, the slightly torn edge of her notebook, the tightness around her eyes. Want to try that answer again, sunshine? Zara swallowed hard, still staring forward. It was just a normal day. And that was the problem, though she couldn't bring herself to say it. The harassment, The isolation, the subtle and not so subtle discrimination, it had become so routine that it was, in fact, just a normal day at Westlake Elementary. Her father was silent for a moment, his hand steady on the wheel. "You know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all." "I know, Dad." Zara finally turned to look at him, forcing a smile. "I'm just tired. Can we have pizza tonight?" Marcus studied her face for a moment longer before nodding. "Pizza it is. And maybe ice cream after? With hot fudge? Is there any other way?" For the first time that day, Zara's smile was genuine. That night, after Zara had gone to bed, Marcus Jackson sat at his home office desk, staring at his daughter's backpack. He'd noticed her carefully hiding something inside it when they got home, and every instinct from his years of investigation work told him that whatever it was mattered. He hesitated, caught between respecting his daughter's privacy and his growing concern about the changes he'd observed in her over the past few months. The once confident, chatty girl who eagerly shared stories about school had gradually been replaced by a quieter, more withdrawn child who couldn't remember details about her day and had started having nightmares. His decision was made when he remembered finding her crying in her room last weekend, claiming it was just allergies, despite the winter season. Inside the backpack's front pocket, he found several crumpled papers. As he carefully unfolded each one, his expression darkened. Crude drawings of monkeys with Zara's name. Notes telling her to go back to the jungle and stop contaminating our school with your kind. One particularly disturbing image showed a stick figure hanging from a tree with Zara's name beneath it. Marcus laid the papers out on his desk, his hands perfectly steady despite the rage building inside him. His FBI training had taught him to channel emotion into methodical action, and those instincts kicked in now. He took photographs of each note, documenting the evidence, then placed them in a folder. Next, he opened his laptop and began searching through Zara's school records, which he had access to as her legal guardian. Her grades had been consistently excellent until 3 months ago, when they began to drop, particularly in Miss S. Bellamy's class. There were also several recent notations about behavioral issues and detentions completely out of character for his conscientious daughter. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. Tomorrow was Friday. He had previously scheduled a day off to catch up on household maintenance. That plan had just changed. Before going to bed, he sent 2 emails, one to Westlake's principal requesting an urgent meeting, and another to an old FBI colleague who now worked in the Department of Education's Civil Rights Division. The next morning, Zara was surprised when her father announced he would be driving her to school. "Don't you have work today?" she asked over breakfast. "Took the day off," Marcus replied casually, though his eyes were more alert than usual. "Thought I might catch up on some things around the house." Zara nodded, relief washing over her that she wouldn't have to take the bus, where Tyler and his friends always saved their most creative torments for when they were out of adult sight. As they pulled up to the school, Marcus turned to her. "I love you, Sunshine, more than anything in this world." Something in his tone made Zara look at him more closely. "I love you too, Dad. Remember what Mom used to say about telling the truth?" Zara nodded, her throat suddenly tight. "That it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It hurts for a second, but then helps you heal faster." "That's right," Marcus squeezed her hand. "Have a good day, Zara. And remember, I've got your back. Always." As Zara walked into the school building, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about her father today. There had been a focused intensity in his eyes that she recognized from years ago, when he would prepare for what her mother used to call his important cases. 20 minutes after dropping Zara off, Marcus Jackson walked through Westlake Elementary's front doors. Gone was the casual dad in jeans and a sweater. In his place stood a man in a crisp, dark suit, his posture military straight, his expression professionally neutral, but somehow conveying absolute authority. It was a transformation Zara would have recognized immediately her father in full federal agent mode. The school secretary, Miss S. Winters, looked up with surprise as he approached her desk. "May I help you?" "Marcus Jackson to see Principal Edwards. I believe he's expecting me." "Oh," Miss S. Winters fumbled with her computer. "Yes, I see the appointment now. But it's not until 3:30 this afternoon. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said smoothly. "The matter is urgent and requires immediate attention. Please inform Principal Edwards that I'm here regarding a Title VI investigation." The mention of Title the Sixth The federal law prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs receiving federal funding had an immediate effect. Miss Winters' eyes widened slightly, and she reached for her phone. Just one moment. Mr. Jackson. 5 minutes later, Marcus was seated across from Principal Richard Edwards, a balding man with an expansive waistline and the forced joviality of someone who had risen to administration without particularly liking children. Mr. Jackson, this is quite unexpected, Edwards began, his smile not reaching his eyes. I had our afternoon meeting in my calendar, Principal Edwards. Marcus interrupted politely but firmly. I'm here today as Zara Jackson's father, but also as a former FBI special agent with 15 years of civil rights investigation experience and current connections to the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. He placed the folder containing the hateful notes on the desk between them. My daughter has been subjected to persistent racial harassment at this school, and based on preliminary evidence, I have reason to believe that some of your staff have not only failed to address it, but may be actively contributing to a hostile educational environment. Edwards stared at the folder but didn't touch it. These are very serious allegations, Mr. Jackson. Westlake has a strict anti-bullying policy, which appears to be selectively enforced. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. I'd like to review all incident reports involving my daughter for the past 6 months, as well as any disciplinary actions taken against the students responsible for these. He gestured to the folder. Those would be confidential student records, Edwards began. Not when they involve my child as the victim, Marcus countered. And I should mention that my colleague at the Department of Education has already initiated a preliminary file on this matter, pending my report after this meeting. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Edwards' forced smile disappeared entirely. I'll have Miss S. Winters gather those records, he said stiffly. In the meantime, perhaps you could tell me specifically what concerns you have. I'd prefer to start with documented evidence rather than anecdotes, Marcus replied. But I will say that my daughter, who previously loved school and maintained a 4.0 GPA, has shown signs of anxiety, depression, and academic decline that coincide with her transfer to Miss S. Bellamy's class 3 months ago. Edwards shifted uncomfortably. Miss S. Bellamy is one of our most experienced educators. Experience doesn't preclude bias. Principal Edwards. Now, those records, please. As Edwards left to instruct Miss S. Winters, Marcus removed a small notebook from his inner jacket pocket and began making notes. His years of investigation had taught him that institutions protecting themselves were often more dangerous than the initial perpetrators. He was prepared for resistance, obfuscation, and denial. What he wasn't prepared for was what happened when the door opened again. Instead of Principal Edwards, a small figure stood in the doorway. Zara, her eyes wide with surprise. Dad? What are you doing here? Before Marcus could respond, Miss S. Bellamy appeared behind Zara, her hand gripping the girl's shoulder tightly. Excuse me, but this student needs to be in my classroom, not wandering the halls. Marcus stood, his expression unchanging despite the fury that flashed through him at seeing this woman's hand on his daughter. Miss S. Bellamy, I presume? I'm Marcus Jackson, Zara's father. Miss S. Bellamy's eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Jackson, this is unexpected. Zara has detention during lunch period today for disrupting my class yesterday. That's interesting, Marcus said, his voice deceptively mild. Because I was just discussing with Principal Edwards a pattern of punitive actions against my daughter that seemed to lack proper documentation or justification. Miss S. Bellamy's grip on Zara's shoulder tightened, causing the girl to wince slightly. Marcus didn't miss it. Remove your hand from my daughter, please, he said, the polite words carrying an unmistakable command. Miss S. Bellamy appeared startled, then dropped her hand. Zara needs to return to class now, actually, Marcus interrupted. Zara will be staying with me for the remainder of this meeting. Since we're discussing incidents involving her, she has every right to be present. He turned to his daughter, his expression softening. Come sit down, sunshine. Zara moved to her father's side, visibly relaxing once away from her teacher. As she sat in the chair next to him, Marcus noticed something that made his jaw tighten, a fresh bruise on her wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve. Before he could comment, Principal Edwards returned with a thin file. Here are the incident reports involving Zara. Though I'm not sure they'll show what you're alleging. He stopped short at seeing Zara and Miss S. Bellamy in the office. Perfect timing, Marcus said. Since we have both Zara and Miss S. Bellamy here, perhaps we can address some inconsistencies directly. He accepted the file and quickly scanned its contents, his experienced eyes picking out patterns immediately. According to these reports, Zara has received detention 6 times in the past month for disruptive behavior, talking back and causing disturbances in the hallway. Yet, there are no witness statements, no specific descriptions of the alleged behaviors, and no record of any other students being disciplined in these incidents. He looked up at Miss S. Bellamy. Would you care to explain? Miss S. Bellamy's lips thinned. I don't need to justify my classroom management to parents who clearly don't understand the challenges of modern education. I understand quite well the challenges of education, Marcus replied evenly. I also understand institutional discrimination, hostile educational environments, and the federal laws prohibiting both. He turned to Zara, his voice gentling. Sunshine, can you tell us about your detentions? What happened before Miss S. Bellamy assigned them? Zara looked between her father and her teacher, fear evident in her expression. Miss S. Bellamy stared at her with cold eyes, the implicit threat clear. Marcus reached over and took his daughter's hand. Remember what we talked about this morning? About telling the truth? No one can hurt you for telling the truth. I promise. Zara took a deep breath. Most of the detentions were because of notes or things that got thrown at me. Tyler Wilson and his friends throw things at me, or trip me, or call me names. When I pick up the notes or fall down, Mrs. Bellamy says I'm causing disruptions. Her voice grew steadier as she continued. Yesterday, Tyler threw a paper at me with a drawing of a monkey with my name. When I picked it up, Miss S. Bellamy gave me detention for littering. That's absurd, Miss S. Bellamy snapped. This child has been a behavioral problem since she joined my class. She's constantly seeking attention, disrupting lessons, by answering questions correctly. Marcus cut in. Because according to her previous progress reports, Zara was at the top of her math class before joining yours, at which point her grades began to drop dramatically, despite test scores showing she understands the material. He turned to Principal Edwards. I'd like to see the seating chart for Miss S. Bellamy's classroom, please. Seating chart? Edwards looked confused. I don't see how that's relevant. It's highly relevant when establishing patterns of segregation or targeting, Marcus stated. Also, I'd like to review footage from the hallway cameras for the past week. This request seemed to genuinely alarm both Edwards and Miss S. Bellamy. Our camera footage is routinely deleted after 48 hours to save server space, Edwards said quickly. How convenient, Marcus observed. In that case, I'll have technical specialists from my former agency recover what they can. I'm sure you're aware that deleted doesn't mean gone in the digital age. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the calm precision that had once made reluctant witnesses decide cooperation was their best option. Principal Edwards, here's what's going to happen now. My daughter will be accompanying me home today. I'll be filing formal complaints with the school district, the State Board of Education, and the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. I'll also be requesting all of Zara's academic records, all communication between staff regarding my daughter, and preservation of all digital evidence, including emails, camera footage, and electronic records. He turned to Miss S. Bellamy, whose face had gone pale. As for you, Miss S. Bellamy, I suggest you consult an attorney. Discriminating against a child based on race isn't just against school policy, it's against federal law. Principal Edwards rose from his chair, sweat beading on his forehead. Mr. Jackson, surely we can handle this internally. There's no need for such escalation. The time for internal handling was when my daughter first became a target, Marcus replied. That opportunity has passed. As they left the office, Zara looked up at her father with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Dad, what happens now? Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Now we make sure this never happens to you or any other child again. In the parking lot, Zara finally asked the question that had been building inside her. Are you mad at me for not telling you sooner? Marcus knelt down to her level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Sunshine, I could never be mad at you for this. The adults who were supposed to protect you failed. I failed by not seeing it sooner. He brushed a tear from her cheek. But that changes today. And I promise you this, justice might work in the shadows sometimes, but it always comes to light, eventually. By Monday morning, Westlake Elementary was in turmoil. Over the weekend, Marcus Jackson had been busy. Using his extensive network of contacts and his intimate knowledge of federal investigation procedures, he had set in motion a series of events that would transform not just his daughter's situation, but the entire school culture. His first call had been to Aisha Washington, his former FBI colleague, now working in the Department of Education's Civil Rights Division. With her guidance, he had filed a formal complaint alleging systematic discrimination and a hostile racial environment at Westlake. His second call was to an investigative journalist he'd worked with on a previous case, Carmen Rodriguez, whose exposes on institutional discrimination had earned her a Pulitzer nomination. After reviewing the evidence Marcus had gathered, including the hateful notes and the suspiciously one-sided disciplinary record, she had agreed to look deeper into patterns at Westlake. His third call had been to Dr. Elaine Bennett, a child psychologist specializing in the impacts of racial trauma, who had agreed to meet with Zara over the weekend to assess the psychological damage and document it professionally. But his most important conversation hadn't involved any of his professional contacts. It had been with Zara herself, a long, honest discussion about why she had hidden her suffering. "I didn't want to bother you," she had admitted, tears streaming down her face. "After Mom died, you were so sad, and then you changed jobs for me, and I thought I could handle it myself." The confession had broken Marcus's heart. "Zara, listen to me," he had told her, holding her close. "There is nothing more important to me than you. Not my job, not my peace of mind, nothing. Your mother would be so proud of how brave you've been, but she would also tell you that you never have to face hard things alone. That's what family means." Throughout the weekend, he had also received calls from other parents at Westlake, word having spread quickly through the parent network. 3 other families of color had come forward with similar stories about Miss S. Bellamy's class and the administration's failure to address complaints. Marcus had connected them with Aisha Washington, strengthening the case for a formal federal investigation. By Sunday evening, Principal Edwards had left 3 increasingly desperate voicemails on Marcus's phone, suggesting meetings, mediation, and finally offering to transfer Zara to our gifted program immediately if they could handle this matter discreetly. Marcus had not returned the calls. Instead, on Monday morning, he drove Zara to a different school, Riverside Elementary, where he had arranged an emergency transfer with the district superintendent's office, citing the ongoing civil rights investigation. The principal there, Dr. Maya Johnson, had a stellar reputation for creating an inclusive educational environment and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked as they pulled into the Riverside parking lot. Zara nodded, clutching her new backpack. "What if the kids here are the same? Then we'll face it together," Marcus promised. "But Dr. Johnson knows what happened at Westlake, and she's already spoken to your new teacher, Mr. Castillo. They're going to make sure things are different here." He hesitated, then added, "And if they're not, you tell me right away. No more suffering in silence, right?" "Right," Zara agreed, her voice small but determined. As they walked into Riverside Elementary, Marcus was struck by the difference in atmosphere. Student artwork representing diverse cultures lined the hallways. Posters advertised cultural awareness events and the school's annual diversity celebration. Most notably, the student population itself was visibly more diverse than Westlake's predominantly white enrollment. Dr. Johnson, a tall black woman with a warm smile, greeted them personally. "Welcome to Riverside, Zara. We're very happy to have you join us." She knelt down to Zara's level. "I've asked Carlos, that's one of our 5th grade student ambassadors, to show you around today and help you get settled. Would that be okay?" Zara nodded, some of the tension visibly leaving her shoulders at Dr. Johnson's kind approach. After meeting Mr. Castillo, a young Latino teacher whose classroom was arranged in collaborative learning pods rather than traditional rows, and introducing Zara to Carlos, a friendly boy who immediately began pointing out the best features of Riverside, Marcus prepared to leave. "You've got my cell number," he reminded Zara. "Call anytime if you need me." "I will," she promised, already looking more relaxed than she had in months at Westlake. As Marcus walked back to his car, his phone rang. It was Carmen Rodriguez. "Marcus, you're not going to believe what I found," the journalist said without preamble. "I started digging into Westlake's history after you contacted me, and this goes way beyond your daughter's classroom. I've identified at least 12 families of color who've transferred out of Westlake in the past 3 years after similar experiences. And get this, Miss S. Bellamy has a history. She taught at a private academy in Georgia that faced a discrimination lawsuit 10 years ago. The case was settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, but I have a source who's willing to talk now. That's exactly the pattern validation we need, Marcus replied, the investigator in him immediately recognizing the significance. What about Edwards? Working on that, Carmen said. But preliminary research shows Westlake has a 94% white student body, despite being in a district that's 40% minorities. Their competitive admission standards for transfer students might be a cover for systematic exclusion. I've requested district-wide acceptance rate data broken down by race. Good work, Marcus said. Keep me posted. As he ended the call, another came in, this time from Aisha Washington. Marcus, I've reviewed your complaint and the additional materials from the other families, she said. We're officially opening an investigation. A team will be at Westlake by the end of the week to review records, conduct interviews, and assess compliance with Title VI. Any pushback from the district? Marcus asked. Initially, Aisha admitted, until I mentioned the possibility of withholding federal funding pending investigation outcomes. It's amazing how quickly cooperation materializes when millions of dollars are at stake. After ending the call with Aisha, Marcus sat in his car for a moment, contemplating the rapid developments. In just 3 days, what had begun as one father's concern for his daughter had expanded into a full federal investigation, with potential legal and financial consequences for an entire school system. He thought about Zara, who had suffered silently for months, believing she had to handle racism and bullying alone to spare him additional worry. The protective rage he'd felt upon discovering those hateful notes had transformed into something more focused, more strategic, a determination to create systemic change. His phone rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number with the school district's area code. Mr. Jackson, a voice began when he answered. This is Superintendent Wallace. I understand you've been in contact with the Department of Education regarding Westlake Elementary. That's correct, Marcus confirmed, keeping his tone professionally neutral. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible to discuss this situation, Wallace continued. The district takes these allegations very seriously. I'm available this afternoon, Marcus replied, though I should inform you that this matter has progressed beyond the allegation stage. The Doe Office for Civil Rights has officially opened an investigation, and evidence is being gathered for potential further legal action. There was a brief silence on the other end. I see, Wallace finally said. Then it's even more important that we meet promptly. Does 2 p.m. at the district offices work for you? I'll be there, Marcus confirmed. As expected, the district administration building exuded institutional power, modern architecture, imposing scale, and carefully curated displays of student achievements and district accolades. Marcus, however, had spent his career in environments designed to intimidate, from federal courthouses to criminal interrogation rooms. The psychological tactics embedded in such spaces were familiar tools to him, not effective threats. Superintendent Wallace, a silver-haired man with a politician's firm handshake and practiced smile, greeted Marcus in a conference room, rather than his personal office, a subtle attempt to dilute authority and create a more collective discussion environment. Also present were the district's legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored suit, and Dr. Richards, the district's director of equity and inclusion, whose uncomfortable expression suggested he rarely dealt with actual equity issues. Mr. Jackson, Wallace began after introductions were complete. First, let me say how deeply concerned I am about your daughter's experience. If what you've described is accurate, it represents a significant failure in our educational mission. Marcus noted the careful phrasing. If what you've described is accurate, contained both implied doubt and preemptive defense. It's accurate, Marcus replied simply, and documented. The superintendent nodded gravely. We want to address this promptly and thoroughly. Miss S. Peterson, our legal counsel, has prepared several options for resolution that I believe will satisfy your concerns while allowing us to implement necessary reforms at Westlake. Miss S. Peterson slid a document across the table. This is a proposed remediation plan that includes transferring your daughter to our gifted program at Riverside, with full transportation provided, a formal reprimand for the staff involved, mandatory diversity training for all Westlake personnel, and a confidential settlement to compensate for any emotional distress experienced. Marcus didn't touch the document. And in exchange, we would ask that you withdraw the Doe complaint and refrain from further public discussion of the matter while we implement these changes, Miss S., Peterson stated smoothly. This would allow us to address the issues without unnecessary disruption to the educational environment. Unnecessary disruption, Marcus repeated, his tone thoughtful. An interesting choice of words. Would you characterize racial harassment as a necessary disruption to the educational environment? Dr. Richards shifted uncomfortably as Miss S. Peterson maintained her professional composure. That's not what I meant, Mr. Jackson. We simply believe that a cooperative approach would benefit everyone involved, especially the children, including the children of color who have been systematically pushed out of Westlake over the past 3 years, Marcus asked. Or are we just focusing on my daughter's individual case while ignoring the pattern? Surprise flickered across the superintendent's face. I'm not sure what pattern you're referring to. 12 families of color have transferred out of Westlake in the past 3 years after experiencing similar discrimination, Marcus stated. Your district's own enrollment data shows Westlake maintaining a 94% white student body, despite district demographics that are far more diverse. And Miss S., Bellamy has a history of discrimination allegations from her previous employment in Georgia. He leaned forward slightly. This isn't about one teacher or one student or one incident. This is about a systemic failure to provide equal educational opportunities to all children, regardless of race. And a confidential settlement with one family won't address that. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Superintendent Wallace's political smile disappeared, replaced by a more calculating expression. You've done your homework, Mr. Jackson. I was a federal investigator for 15 years, Marcus reminded him. This is what I do. Then you understand that investigations can be complex, findings can be ambiguous, and reforms take time, the superintendent replied. The offer we're making would provide immediate benefits for your daughter while allowing us the opportunity to implement broader changes appropriately. Marcus considered the man across from him, the careful wording, the implied pressure, the institutional reflex to contain damage rather than truly address its causes. He recognized it all from countless similar meetings during his FBI career. Superintendent Wallace, he said finally, I appreciate your offer, but it misses the fundamental issue here. My daughter has already been transferred to Riverside, where she started today. Her individual situation is being addressed. What remains is accountability, not just for Mrs. Bellamy, but for Principal Edwards, who ignored the problem, for your district policies that allowed Westlake to maintain what amounts to de facto segregation, and for a system that prioritizes the comfort of white students and parents over the safety and equality of students of color. He stood, straightening his jacket. The Department of Education investigation will proceed. I've also been in contact with several families who experienced similar discrimination at Westlake, who are considering a class action lawsuit. And a journalist is currently investigating the pattern of discriminatory practices within your district with particular focus on Westlake. The superintendent's face had gone rigid. You're making a mistake, Mr. Jackson. Litigation and investigations will drain resources that could be better used to help students. Resources should have been used to help all students equally from the beginning, Marcus replied evenly. Since they weren't, accountability becomes necessary for genuine change. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Principal Edwards should expect a call from the Department of Education. They'll be requesting immediate preservation of all records relating to disciplinary actions, transfer requests, and communications regarding minority students. Any evidence of destruction or alteration of those records would, of course, constitute federal obstruction charges. With that parting reminder, he left the conference room, feeling the weight of 3 stunned gazes on his back. Later that afternoon, as Marcus waited outside Riverside Elementary to pick up Zara, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Carmen Rodriguez's first article had been published online. Racial discrimination allegations prompt federal investigation of elite elementary school. The piece detailed the systematic patterns at Westlake, including statistical analysis of racial disparities in disciplinary actions, acceptance rates, and resource allocation. It mentioned no names of minor children, but included anonymous accounts from several families who had experienced similar discrimination. Most damaging was a section detailing Miss S. Bellamy's history at her previous school, including quotes from a former administrator who had been bound by the NDA, but had finally decided to speak out. "We paid to make the problem go away instead of fixing the underlying issues. And apparently we just passed those issues on to another school district." As parents began emerging with their children, Marcus put away his phone, focusing instead on the school doors. When Zara appeared, her expression was the most relaxed he had seen in months. She was walking alongside Carlos and another girl, all three engaged in animated conversation. "Dad," she called when she spotted him, hurrying over with her new friends. "This is Carlos and Amara. Mr. Castillo put us in the same work group for our science project on renewable energy. And guess what? I get to design the solar panel demonstration." Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen at the excitement in her voice. "That sounds amazing, sunshine. Did you have a good day?" "The best," Zara confirmed. "Mr. Castillo asked me to solve a really hard math problem, and when I got it right, he high-fived me instead of acting like I was showing off. And at lunch, I sat with Carlos and Amara, and nobody said anything mean about my hair or my skin or anything." The simple happiness in her description of basic, decent treatment was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. "I'm so glad," Marcus said sincerely. After Zara said goodbye to her new friends with promises to text about their project, they walked toward the car. "Dad?" Zara asked as they drove home. "Is it true that Wessel, Dad?" Zara asked as they drove home. "Is it true that Westlake is in trouble because of what happened to me?" Marcus considered his response carefully. "Not just because of what happened to you, sunshine. Your experience was part of a bigger pattern that needed to be addressed. Sometimes it takes one brave person speaking up to help everyone see a problem that's been there all along. But I didn't speak up," Zara said quietly. "You found the notes. You survived," Marcus corrected gently. "Every day you got up and went back to a place where people were hurting you. That's its own kind of bravery." Zara was thoughtful for a moment. "Do you think things will change at Westlake now?" "Yes," Marcus said with certainty. "Sometimes systems only change when they're forced to. That's why laws and investigations exist, to make sure everyone plays by fair rules, even the people in charge." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, a routine they had established after her mother died, Zara seemed lighter, more talkative, more like her old self. She described Mr. Castillo's classroom with its reading corner full of books, featuring diverse characters. She talked about the school's upcoming Cultural Heritage Festival where students could share traditions from their family backgrounds. And Dad, they have a black female principal. Dr. Johnson is so nice, but also kind of strict in a good way. When Carlos was showing me around, some sixth-grade boy made a comment about my hair, and she heard it from like 30 feet away. She made him apologize right then and told him that at Riverside, we celebrate our differences, not mock them. Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "Sounds like we found the right place for you." "I think so," Zara agreed, then hesitated. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why didn't you tell me about the investigation and the journalist and everything?" "I only know because I overheard you on the phone this morning." Marcus set down the knife he was using to chop vegetables, giving her his full attention. "I wanted to protect you from having to think about Westlake anymore, but you're right to ask, and I should have been more open with you." He pulled out a chair at the kitchen island, gesturing for her to sit. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," Zara said simply. So as they finished preparing dinner, Marcus explained in terms an 11-year-old could understand, but without talking down to her about the Department of Education investigation, the journalist's research, and the meeting with the superintendent. "Will Miss S. Bellamy lose her job?" Zara asked as they sat down to eat. "I think that's likely," Marcus answered honestly. "But more importantly, the school and the district will have to make real changes to make sure other teachers don't do what she did." Zara nodded thoughtfully. "Good. I wouldn't want anyone else to feel like I did." Over the next few weeks, the ripple effects of Marcus Jackson's actions continued to spread through the Westview School District. The Department of Education's investigation team spent 4 days at Westlake Elementary, interviewing staff, reviewing records, and examining policies and practices. Their preliminary findings, which were leaked to Carmen Rodriguez, identified significant title, the sixth compliance concerns, including racially disparate disciplinary practices and failure to respond appropriately to reports of harassment based on race. Principal Edwards announced his early retirement, effective immediately. Miss S. Bellamy was placed on administrative leave, pending a district review of her conduct, though sources within the administration indicated to Carmen that termination was a foregone conclusion. Most significantly, Superintendent Wallace unveiled what he called a comprehensive equity initiative for the entire district new anti-discrimination policies, mandatory cultural competency training for all staff, recruitment efforts aimed at increasing staff diversity, and a complete overhaul of the admissions process for schools like Westlake to ensure equal access for all district students. The fact that these changes came only after the threat of federal intervention, potential litigation, and public exposure didn't escape notice. Carmen's follow-up article pointedly observed that reforms apparently impossible for years became immediately feasible once legal and financial consequences loomed. For Marcus and Zara, however, the focus had shifted to healing and moving forward. Zara was thriving at Riverside, her natural academic abilities flourishing in an environment where they were celebrated rather than suppressed. She had made several friends and was even considering joining the school's math team after encouragement from Mr. Castillo. At home, the nightmares had stopped. The quiet withdrawal that had so concerned Marcus was replaced by animated dinner conversations and spontaneous laughter. They had also begun seeing Dr. Bennett together for family therapy sessions, creating space to process not only Zara's experiences at Westlake, but also the lingering grief over her mother's death that both had tried to manage alone. 3 months after the transfer to Riverside, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Aisha Washington at the Department of Education. The final investigation report will be released next week, she informed him. The findings are comprehensive and will mandate significant changes at Westlake and throughout the district. Good, Marcus replied. Will the findings be made public? Yes, though with student identities protected, of course. But there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. Aisha paused. We've been approached by 5 other school districts facing similar complaints. They're requesting training on how to proactively address discrimination issues before they reach the investigation stage. That sounds promising, Marcus said cautiously. It does, Aisha agreed. And it made me think of you. Your background in federal investigation combined with your personal experience as a parent navigating these issues gives you a unique perspective. Would you consider consulting with us on developing a training program? Your insights could help create meaningful change beyond just your daughter's situation. The offer took Marcus by surprise. Since leaving the FBI for private security consulting, he had deliberately chosen work that allowed him more flexibility for Zara. This would be a return to more meaningful public service, but in a new capacity. I'd need to discuss it with Zara first, he said finally. Any changes to my work would affect her too. Of course, Aisha replied, take the time you need. But I think you could make a real difference here, Marcus. Sometimes the most effective advocates are those who've had to fight the system themselves. That evening, Marcus brought up the conversation with Zara during dinner. What would it mean? She asked practically. Would you have to travel a lot? Some travel, Marcus acknowledged, but mostly local work developing training materials and presenting to school administrators. It would be part-time, so I'd still be home with you most of the time. Zara considered this, twirling spaghetti around her fork. I think you should do it, she decided. You always tell me that when bad things happen, we should try to make something good come from them. This sounds like that. Marcus smiled at her wisdom, so beyond her years. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Zara replied with a grin. Some people just didn't want to see it. The following week, Marcus attended the public release of the Department of Education's findings on Westlake Elementary. The report confirmed what Carmen Rodriguez had uncovered in her reporting and what Marcus had suspected from the beginning. Westlake had maintained a pattern of practices that effectively discriminated against students of color, creating a hostile educational environment that violated federal law. The district, already implementing many of the required changes in anticipation of the findings, issued a public statement acknowledging the serious failures identified in the report and committing to transformative reforms to ensure equal educational opportunities for all students. As Marcus left the press conference, he spotted a group of families he recognized from Carmen's articles, other parents whose children had experienced discrimination at Westlake. One of them, a black woman with a daughter about Zara's age, approached him. "Mr. Jackson, I'm Tiana Roberts. My daughter Amaya was in Miss S. Bellamy's class 2 years ago." She extended her hand, which Marcus shook. "I just wanted to thank you. We complained when Amaya was there, but nothing changed. We ended up moving her to a different school, but no one was ever held accountable until now. I just did what any parent would do," Marcus replied. Tiana shook her head. "No, you did what parents with resources, knowledge, and connections can do. Many of us didn't have those advantages. That's why what you're doing now with the Department of Education is so important." News of his consultation role had apparently spread. "I'm just getting started with that," Marcus acknowledged. "Well, some of us parents have formed a group, Equity in Education, to support families navigating discrimination issues in schools. We'd love it if you could speak at one of our meetings sometime. Share your insights on how parents without your background can still effectively advocate for their children." The invitation touched something in Marcus. His work with the Department of Education would focus on institutional change, working with administrators and policymakers. But this was an opportunity to empower parents directly, to help families without his resources still find pathways to justice. "I'd be honored," he told Tiana sincerely. 6 months later, Zara stood nervously in the Riverside Elementary auditorium, preparing to present her science project at the district-wide Science and Innovation Fair. Her solar energy demonstration had evolved into a sophisticated model showing how communities of color were disproportionately affected by fossil fuel infrastructure and how renewable energy could address these environmental justice issues. "You've got this, sunshine," Marcus assured her, adjusting the display one last time. "Your project is amazing. What if the judges don't get it?" Zara worried. "It's not just about the science. It's about how science connects to social justice. Then you'll help them understand," Marcus said confidently. "That's what leadership looks like, helping others see connections they might have missed." As the judges made their rounds, Marcus stepped back, watching his daughter explain her project with passion and precision. The confident girl gesturing animatedly at her display bore little resemblance to the withdrawn child who had once hidden racist notes rather than causing trouble. His phone vibrated with a text message from Carmen Rodriguez. "Just got word, Miss S. Bellamy's teaching license has been permanently revoked by the state board. Thought you'd want to know." It was a significant development, ensuring that Eleanor Bellamy wouldn't simply move to another district and continue her discriminatory practices. But watching Zara now, Marcus realized that justice had many forms. There was the formal justice of investigations, reports, and consequences. But there was also the justice of transformation, of seeing his daughter stand tall again, of watching a school district begin the hard work of genuine change, of helping other parents find their voices. After the judges moved on, Zara bounded over to him, eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, they really liked it." One judge said he'd never thought about the connection between environmental policy and racial equity before. "That's what change looks like," Marcus told her proudly, one mind at a time. Later that evening, after Zara had won an honorable mention for her project, and they were celebrating with ice cream, she grew contemplative. "Dad, remember when you said that sometimes we have to make good things come from bad experiences?" Marcus nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been thinking about that a lot. What happened at Westlake was really awful." She stirred her ice cream thoughtfully. "But now you're helping the Department of Education make schools better, and I'm not afraid to speak up in class anymore. And other kids might not have to go through what I did because of the changes at Westlake." She looked up at him, her eyes showing wisdom beyond her years. "So maybe that's how justice really works, not just punishing the bad stuff, but building something better after." Marcus reached across the table to squeeze her hand, his heart full with pride and love. "That's exactly how it works, sunshine. That's exactly how it works." In the year that followed, Marcus Jackson's work expanded from consulting with the Department of Education to becoming a nationally recognized advocate for educational equity. The training program he developed was implemented in school districts across 3 states, with measurable reductions in racially disparate disciplinary actions and improvements in minority student academic performance. His partnership with the Equity in Education Parent Group grew into a nonprofit organization, providing resources, legal support, and advocacy training to families facing discrimination in schools. What had begun as one father's fight for his daughter had evolved into a movement creating systemic change. And Zara? She completed 5th grade at Riverside as the top mathematics student in her class and joined both the math team and the Student Equity Council. The quiet, withdrawn girl from Westlake was gone, replaced by a confident young woman who understood both the reality of injustice and the possibility of change. On the last day of school, as they walked to the car after the 5th grade graduation ceremony, Zara looked up at her father. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Marcus thought of his late wife, her fierce intelligence, her unwavering sense of justice, her love for their daughter. "Without a doubt," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Without a single doubt." Zara nodded, satisfied. "That's what I think too." She slipped her hand into his as they walked together into the summer sunshine. A father and daughter who had transformed personal pain into collective progress, proving that sometimes justice works most effectively in the shadows before emerging into the light for all to see.